Learn Japanese history. We are your navigators, Taro and Hanako. Welcome. We're doing a special exploration today, focusing on a really formative period in Japanese history.
Definitely. A time when the aristocracy, particularly one family, held immense sway.
Hi, we're diving into how the powerful Fujiwara clan rose right to the very top.
And the ripples that send through politics, through society, everything, really.
Yeah, understanding this, well, it's crucial context for everything that follows in Japanese history, so you'll want to stick with us. Okay, so the Fujiwara clan, they become this absolutely dominant force. It almost feels like they came out of nowhere. Suddenly they're running the show.
Well, it looks sudden, perhaps, but there's a very deliberate long-term strategy behind it.
Oh, okay.
It really kicks off significantly with Fujiwara Fuyutsugu. He grasped something fundamental.
Which was?
That the real key to power, at this stage anyway, wasn't necessarily brute force. It was something more subtle.
Like what?
Kinship. Ties to the imperial family itself.
Ah, marriage politics.
Exactly. He started carefully arranging marriages, weaving the Fujiwara bloodline directly into the imperial lineage.
Smart. Not just for him, but for the future.
Precisely. It was about positioning the entire family for generations of influence.
And that patient approach, it really comes to fruition with his son, right? Fujiwara Yoshifusa.
Yes, and this is where things take a really dramatic turn.
Because he wasn't imperial himself.
Correct. Yet, he climbs the ranks, gets appointed Taiji Daijin's Grand Minister, and then, the big one, in 858, he becomes Sessho.
The regent. For a young Emperor Seiwa.
Yeah, that's a massive leap, unprecedented for someone not of imperial blood.
It totally changes the game, doesn't it? I mean, what did that signal, a non-imperial guy holding that kind of power?
It fundamentally shifted the political landscape. Before Yoshifusa, the idea of direct imperial rule, or at least rule by imperial relatives, was, the bedrock.
Right.
His regency cracked that foundation. It showed power could be wielded effectively by someone outside that direct line.
So it set a precedent. Power through politics and connections, not just birth.
Exactly. Strategic maneuvering, family ties. These became validated ramps to the top.
But it wasn't like they just walked in unopposed. There were other powerful families around.
Oh, absolutely. Intense competition.
We see names like Tomo no Konomine and Tachibana no Hayanari getting pushed aside during the Jiwa incident. What does that tell us about how the Fujiwara operated?
Ruthlessness, basically. The Jiwa incident shows they weren't afraid to play hardball.
So accusing rivals, getting them dismissed.
Yes. It eliminated immediate threats, but also sent a very clear message to anyone else thinking of challenging them.
Don't mess with the Fujiwara.
Pretty much. It highlights just how intricate and, frankly, cutthroat court politics could be back then.
And then there's that Etmon incident in 866, a fire at a palace gate.
Right, the Kinmon Gate.
And accusations fly, pointing at Tomo no Yoshio. The Tomo and Ki clans decline after that. It sounds dramatic.
It was dramatic. And incredibly convenient for the Fujiwara.
How so? It looks like a criminal investigation on the surface.
Well, whether Tomo no Yoshio was truly guilty or not, the accusations stuck. His downfall, and that of the related Ki clan, created a power vacuum right at the top.
Which the Fujiwara were perfectly placed to fill.
Exactly. It smoothed the path for formally establishing that regency under Yoshifusa. It shows how they could leverage seemingly unrelated events.
Okay, so the Sessho role is established, but then the title changes, evolves into Kampaku with Fujiwara Mototsune. What's the difference there?
That's a really important nuance. The Sessho was specifically a regent for a minor emperor.
Right, acting for the emperor.
The Kampaku role, though, as Mototsune took it on, became much broader.
How so?
Well, after Emperor Yutze was deposed and Emperor Kuch came in, Mototsune was given authority not just to assist the emperor, but to lead all the officials.
Okay, so more direct power over the administration.
And then Emperor Uda formally established this as the Kampaku role. Think of it like this. Sessho is a temporary guardian. Kampaku is more like a permanent chief advisor, maybe even chief executive.
Regardless of the emperor's age.
Precisely. Reviewing all imperial commands, all submissions to the emperor. It made Fujiwara influence almost absolute. They were vetting everything.
Wow. It sounds like an unbreakable grip. But history's never that simple, is it? There was a pushback.
There was a brief window where the imperial court itself tried to reassert its authority.
Particularly with Emperor Uda.
Yes. After Fujiwara Mototsune died, Emperor Uda made a significant move. He didn't appoint a new regent or chancellor immediately.
Trying to rule directly.
That seems to be the aim, trying to restore some balance. And part of that was promoting Sugawara no Michizane.
Ah, the famous scholar.
Highly talented, but from a less powerful background than the Fujiwara, who would have promoted him rapidly alongside Fujiwara Tokihira.
An interesting balancing act. Trying to counter the Fujiwara, perhaps?
It certainly looks that way. Michizane's rise was unusual, definitely a signal of a potential shift.
But, as you said, brief. Michizane's story doesn't end well. His exile is quite tragic.
It is. And his downfall in 901 tells you everything about the real extent of Fujiwara power.
How so?
Because it was orchestrated, mainly by Fujiwara Tokihira, despite Emperor Daigo favoring Michizane.
The Fujiwara could still take him down.
Exactly. They saw him as a threat, used political intrigue, accusations, and boom, exile to Dazaifu.
So even imperial favor wasn't enough protection against the established Fujiwara machine.
It demonstrates their deep-rooted, enduring power at court.
Okay, so after all this intense consolidation and the failed pushback, we get to the Enji era. People often talk about this as a sort of golden age. Why?
Well, the Enji era under Emperor Daigo is often looked back on, perhaps a bit romantically.
Idealized.
Yes, idealized as a time when imperial authority was strong again, when things were well governed. There were real efforts to shore up the Ritsuri system.
That's the big legal and administrative code, right?
Correct. They compiled things like the Enji Shiki detailed regulations and the Nihon Sandai Jitsuroku, one of the official histories.
So projects aimed at central control.
Right. And this period, along with Emperor Murakami's later reign, gets remembered as the Enji Tenraku no Ji, the peace of Enji and Tenraku.
But you said idealized. So what was the pitch? Was it really all smooth sailing?
Not quite. Beneath that surface of imperial effort, the Ritsuri system itself was actually fraying at the edges, especially out in the provinces.
Ah, okay. So while the capital was trying to project order?
The reality on the ground was getting more complicated.
Yeah.
Local administration was weakening.
How was that manifesting? What was actually happening out there?
You see some significant shifts. For one, more provincial governors, the kokushi, were becoming absentees.
Meaning
They'd stay in the capital, enjoying court life, collecting their salaries,
while someone else did the actual work.
Exactly. They'd send deputies, mokudai, out to the provinces to handle things.
Okay. But then you also had governors who did go to the provinces.
Yes, the Zuri. These were the resident governors, and they started consolidating a lot of power locally. They often took control of provincial affairs, essentially privatizing resources and land in exchange for guaranteeing a fixed tax payment back to the central government. And they could get quite wealthy doing it.
Like Fujiwara no Motonaga, who actually got sued over it in 988.
Precisely. That case highlights the power they wielded and also the tensions it caused.
Because the local elites weren't just going to stand by, right? These Zerikizoku.
No, these were influential families with deep local roots. They definitely pushed back against the Zuri.
What was their strategy? How could they resist a governor?
Alliances. They'd connect with powerful nobles or big temples and shrines back in the capital.
And then?
They'd commend land to them, creating private estates, shacha.
Tax-exempt estates.
Often, yes. Or at least with significant privileges. This let them bypass the provincial governor's authority and protect their own wealth and influence.
So you get conflict over land, over revenue.
Big time. And it created this weird dynamic where even the powerful Zuri had to play the game. They'd make donations to those same central nobles and institutions. It was called ganin.
To get their jobs. Or keep them.
Both. To secure appointments or get reappointed. It was a complex web of patronage.
And all this time, who's doing the day-to-day running of the province?
Increasingly, it fell to local officials, Machu Kanjin, often drawn from those same Ziri-Kizoku families. They worked under the Mokudai, the governor's deputy, but they held the practical knowledge and local connections.
So power is shifting locally, too, becoming more diffuse.
Definitely. A clear shift in the dynamics on the ground.
This sounds unstable. A recipe for trouble.
And trouble certainly arrived. That brings us squarely to the Juhei and Tenji rebellions.
Occurring right between those idealized Enji and Tenraku periods.
Exactly. A period of significant internal unrest, really showing the cracks in the system.
And this is where we start seeing the rise of military figures more prominently. The Bushi.
Yes. These regional military leaders were building their power bases through warfare, gathering retainers Kaiko and Richo.
Warriors gaining influence locally.
And interestingly, the court itself started using them. Some were brought in for palace security, the Takiguchi no Bushi. They were called samurai.
Ah, the early use of that term.
And others were sent out as imperial agents, Surihushi, or Shushi, basically military envoys tasked with suppressing disorder in the provinces.
So the court is trying to use these emerging warriors to maintain control.
Kind of co-opting them, yes, but it also acknowledges their growing importance.
Let's focus on the Kanto region first. That becomes a real hotspot, doesn't it?
It does. You have figures like Takamochi from the Kanmu branch of the Taira clan to Kanmu Heishi arriving as a governor.
But his family stays.
His descendants settle, put down roots, and become powerful local magnates themselves. Which leads us to
Taira no Masakado and his rebellion in 939.
Right. It starts, as many things did, with disputes over private estates, shown with his own relatives and local officials.
But it escalates dramatically.
Hugely. He allies with other disgruntled local bosses, starts capturing provincial capitals Kokufu and Hitachi Shimatuke Kusuke.
He appoints his own governors.
Yes. And then, the ultimate act of defiance. He declares himself the new emperor, Shinno.
Wow. That's not just a local dispute anymore. That's a direct challenge to Kyoto.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, something similar, though different in character, is brewing in the West.
Fujiwara no Sumitomo.
Yes. Initially appointed governor of Iyo province, but he basically goes rogue.
Sets up his own base.
On Haiburi Island, and starts leading pirates raiding throughout the Seto Inland Sea.
Actual piracy, arson, plunder.
Yes. Major disruptions to trade and travel. And they even attacked Dazaifu, the main government outpost in Kyushu, in 940.
So coordinated, large-scale armed resistance in both the East and West.
These were the first really large-scale rebellions against the central government, led by these emerging regional military forces.
Yeah.
A huge shock to the system.
Were they successful? Did they overthrow the government?
No, ultimately, both rebellions were put down by government forces.
Okay.
But, and this is the crucial point, how they were put down is what matters.
Meaning?
The central government couldn't do it alone. They had to rely heavily on other regional warriors.
Pitting warrior against warrior.
Exactly. In the east, figures like Taira no Satomori Masakado's own cousin and Fujiwara no Hidesato were key to defeating Masakado.
And in the West?
Minamoto no Tsunemoto played a significant role against Sumitomo.
So suppressing the rebellions actually empowered other warrior families.
Precisely. It gave clans like the Minamoto, the Genji, and the Taira the Hike a massive opportunity. They gained prestige, rewards, influence.
Setting the stage for their later rivalry and dominance.
Absolutely. You can even see illustrations from the time, like Hidesato carrying Masakado's head or Tomozani attacking Sumitomo. These events were seen as hugely significant.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. It's been a complex period. We started with the Fujiwara's incredibly strategic rise.
Using marriage, political maneuvering, eliminating rivals, consolidating power through the Sesshin Kanpaku rules.
Then that brief moment of attempted imperial comeback with Michizain, which ultimately showed just how strong the Fujiwara grip still was.
And all the while, beneath the surface, local governance was transforming.
Absentee governors, powerful resident zuri, local families carving out Shon.
Leading to tension, instability, and the growing importance of local officials and, crucially, local warriors.
Which bursts onto the scene with the Masakado and Sumitomo rebellions.
Rebellions that, although suppressed, paradoxically paved the way for the very warrior clans, the Taira and Minamoto, who would eventually eclipse the aristocracy.
So understanding this whole period, the peak of aristocratic rule, the internal challenges, the changing local scene, the first major warrior uprisings, it's absolutely fundamental.
You really can't grasp the rise of the samurai or the shape of medieval Japan without understanding these foundations laid during the Heian period. It's essential context as you continue exploring Japanese history. Which leads us to a final thought, something for you to really chew on.
Okay.
Considering everything we've discussed, the court politics, the shifting local power, the emergence of military force, how exactly did the seeds sown in this time of seemingly dominant aristocratic rule, how did they ultimately grow into the full-blown warrior society that defined Japan for centuries?
What were the tipping points? Which seemingly small shifts back then ended up having the most profound, long-lasting impact down the line.
Something to think about.